It was a quiet Monday morning, 26th of April 1999. I got a call shortly after midday telling me that Jill Dando, the television presenter, had died after being either stabbed or shot. Clearly it was quite shocking. Ran up to the news desk to inform them. A team of reporters, photographers were dispatched, and by the time we got across to Fulham in West London, where Jill lived in a terrace house in Gowan Avenue, a quiet residential street. The whole place had been sealed off by the police at both ends. There was a sense of shock. Eventually, early in the evening, Hamish Campbell, the senior investigating officer, mentioned that she'd been shot. This then obviously gave rise to the immediate theory that she'd been killed by a professional assassin. Now, as time moved on, the police realised that they did not have an immediate suspect. So they then began looking at different theories. This, in essence, incorporated obsessives and stalkers, and also those people who were known to Jill. They also looked at the possibility that she could have been killed by a professional assassin because of the work she did on Crime Watch, although that was a theory that was never given too much credence. There were 9 suspects in all who were fully investigated by police. These included Barry George. They also included an elderly man who was obsessed with Jill and was seen on Gowan Avenue on the morning of her murder. They included a police officer who knew Jill. They included 2 businessmen. They included a hitman who was suspected of carrying out other murders. So these 9 suspects were a huge amount of work. It still went nowhere until they eventually came across Barry George. To begin with, there wasn't the information to suggest that he was a significant suspect. But as the police began to investigate fully, they looked at his background. They discovered that he was a fantasist. They discovered that he had convictions for sexual assaults, serious sexual assaults, carried out on the doorsteps of random victims, random female victims in the West London area. They discovered that he had been to Kensington Palace wearing a gas mask, an SAS gas mask, and carrying imitation firearms, and this really perked up their interest. And as they also began looking into Barry George, they discovered in their system that there were reports of Barry George being seen around the address at Gowan Avenue on the day of the murder. Barry George also in some ways fitted the description of a suspect who was seen running away from the scene, who was seen close by in an overcoat. This man was not an identical match for Barry George, but he had dark features, he wore an overcoat. It was conceivably possible in the police minds that this was indeed Barry George. Barry George was arrested just over a year after Jill was murdered. He appeared in court accused of her murder. I was there on that day, and I was there to watch him at the Old Bailey in 2001 when he was convicted of her murder. The evidence was eventually challenged in the Court of Appeal because there were firearms residue in the inside overcoat pocket. That evidence had allegedly been contaminated because the clothing hadn't been bagged properly. It went back to the Old Bailey for a retrial, and Barry George was then acquitted in 2008, having spent 7 years in prison. Since then, the police have periodically reviewed the case, but there haven't been any concrete leads, and sadly Jill's brother Nigel has now come to the conclusion that it could be one of those murders where the police are unable to find the person who did it. They're unable to prove who murdered his sister.